All right, Shabbos, say good morning, good morning. Let us begin, Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today. Begin by thanking our sponsors, the Talmud Torah sponsors, for the month of Tishrei. To thank Dr. Linda Weinberg, Sarah, Enrique Gratz, Julia, Rena, and Eve, in loving memory of husband, father, Zayda, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Peretz, Moshe ben Avram, David. To thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating the Shurim this month in the Schus of Rafua Shalema for Shulamis Bas Susha. To thank Adam and Yudi Ben Zev for dedicating the Shurim this month in the Schus of all of our Tfilos being Niskabel. Our week of learning sponsors Greg and Rachel Levitan in commemoration of the first yard site of Greg's mother, Esther Bas Herschel, and in honor of the incredible organization Renewal. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Menachem and Susie Schoenfeld, in appreciation of the Kehila, Gabi Cohn, Maishi Abramson, Avran Elbaum, the Baalei Kriya, Shani Tapper, Alana Levinson, Yonason Kaplan, and all those who contributed their time and effort so that we can enjoy a truly inspirational and uplifting Yom Tov. Amen, amen. Now we'll say with that, let us begin. So we are picking up. Today's daf is Tzadik Gimel, 93, and I will say we left off at the Mishnah. So we'll say, so really incredible sugya today. Here we go, 93. Misha haya nasui shalosh nashim. Someone who is married to 3 women, umeis. No surprise there, right? So the Mishnah says as follows. So someone who was married to 3 women and he died. Now I will say, now in this case over here, right, he died. Obviously he's married to all 3 women at once and he dies. So what's the halacha? Now I will say, now this is a fascinating case. Ksuvaso shalzu mana, vishalzu masayim, vishalzu shalosh meos. Now, each wife had a different value of a ksuva. So just for our purposes, let's call it again, the first wife has a ksuva of 100 zuz, second wife of 200 zuz, third wife of 300 zuz. Now, here's the problem. Ve'ein sham ela mana. Now, I will say now, the estate only leaves behind the mana. Leaves behind 100 zuz. So the shaila, of course, is how do we go ahead and distribute the property? So what's the halacha? Cholkin b'shaveh. Ultimately, we just split up the one mana equally. So everybody gets 33.3 zuzim from the one mana that is left in the estate. Hayu shamasai. And I will say now, okay, so that's a basic case. 3 different ksuvas, 100, 200, 300. Only 100 zuz left in the estate. Take the 100 zuz, divide it equally between the 3 wives. Now, I will say a couple of important qualifications in this Mishnah. If you take a look at Rashi says shalzu mana v'shalzu masayim, almost right across in Rashi. Ushloshtam nechtemu biyom echad. Now, I will say this is a case of where all 3 ksuvas are dated on the same date. He married all 3 of these women on the same day. Now I say, now again, it has to be that way, right? Because if it's not that way, then what's the halacha? Obviously, the earlier the ksuva, the earlier the claim, right? So it has to, in other words, anytime we're talking about 3 women sharing equally in the pool of the estate, it must be that they were married on the same day. And I will say, now the truth is, remember, it doesn't actually have to mean he married them on the same day. It just means that the ksuva is dated on the same day. So remember again, you could construct a case where you have ksuvas dated on the same day, even if marriages happen on different days, but we don't have to get into that right now. The point that we have is, from a lien perspective, even though the value of the 3 ksuvas is different, 100, 200, 300, the date is the same for all of them, so therefore all of them effectively have the same lien, right, on the estate. Good. So Cholkos b'shaveh, Rashi says over here, Shari koach shloshtan shaveh b'shibud maneh tibekulu ikamana. And I will say, when you read this, it sounds strange, right? That all three of them split the first mana. After all, again, we would assume that the one who has a ksuba of 300 should have a greater percentage, or at least a greater grip. Here's what we're going to see is, all of them have that same claim on the 100. That's really what happens over here. Because we will say, since all of them share a common denominator, that's what? They all have a ksuva, that's what? That is worth at least 100. So therefore, in that first 100, right, both wife 1, 2, and 3 all have the same claim. Okay, good. Therefore, they split that first 100 equally. Hayusham asayim. What happens if there's 200 zuz in the estate? So same case. Ruvain married to 3 women, right? Wife 1, wife 2, wife 3. And therefore, again, but this case, same case. Wife 1, ksuv of 100. Wife 2, ksuv of 200. Wife 3, ksuv of 300. And now there's 200 zuz left in the estate. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Shalmana no teles chamishim shamasayim v'shal shlosh me'os shlosha. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the way this will work is like this. Wife number 1 gets 50 zuz. Wives number 2 and 3 both get 75 zuz apiece. 75 zuz apiece. The Gemara will go through how we arrive at these numbers. So the Gemara says, good. Shlosha shalzav. Good. Hayu sham shlosh meos. What happens? So I'll say, so case 2, there's 200 zuz in the estate. If there's 200 zuz, wife 1 gets 50, wives 2 and 3 get 75 each, for a total of 200. Again, we'll discuss how we get to those numbers. Hayu sham shlosh meos. What happens now if there's 300 zuz in the estate? We'll say, same case. Wife 1 has a ksuv of 100, wife 2 a ksuv of 200, wife 3 a ksuv of 300, and now again there's 300 zuz in the estate. What's the halacha? Shamana no teles chamishim. So the wife who has a ksuva of 100 zuz, she ultimately gets 50 zuz. She gets her 50 zuz. V'shamasayim mana, the wife who has a ksuva of 200 zuz gets 100. V'shal shlosh me'os shisha shel zav. And the wife who has a ksuva of 300 zuz, she collects 150 zuz from the estate. So in this case, the distribution will be 50, 100, 150. V'chein gimel, so we'll say, so those are the halachas. Now the Mishnah just says, v'chein gimel shetil l'kis. Now we'll say, we're going to spend a good amount of time on this case, because the truth is, this is absolutely riveting. These same halachas apply in business. Now I will say, this is a very common situation. Gimel shetilu l'kis. I will say, what happens if halacha l'maisa, 3 people, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, invested in a business together. And what happens? I will say, let's say they invested differing amounts. Ruvain invested 100 zuz. Shimon invested, let's just keep it parallel to the ksuva cases. Right, Shimon invested 200 zuz, and Levi invested 300 zuz. So the Mishnah says, Pichsu ahosiro. Now we'll have to see what this means, but what it sounds like is, if the business made money or lost money, kach heim cholkin. Kach, now we'll say, again, all of these words are a little bit ambiguous, but it sounds like what the Mishnah is saying is that profit or loss sharing ratios are based on what? Amounts of investment. So the amount you share in the profits, the amount you share in the loss is fundamentally tethered to the amount of money you invested into the business. Okay, we're going to talk about that business case because it's absolutely riveting. But let's start with the ksuva. Gemara. Shamana no teles chamishim, tlasin v'tilsa hu de islay. So we'll say, the Gemara says like this. Let's go to the first case. Right, in case number 1, so ultimately again, Reuven's married to 3 women. Wife A, ksuva of 100. Wife B, ksuva of 200. Wife C, a ksuva of 300. In case number 1, I will say, there's one mana ultimately in the estate. So what's the halacha? Cholkin b'shaveh. In case number 2, ultimately again, so we'll say cholkin b'shaveh. So the way it's said, I was saying that, again, I'm sorry, let me just, so the way it's said, cholkim b'shaveh, good. So the Gemara says, well, cholkim b'shaveh would mean what? 33.3 for each wife. But yet, I will say, if you look in case number 2, so case number 1 just says they split it equally, but it doesn't say what? How they're splitting it. In case number 2, where the Mishnah says there's 200 zuz left in the estate, so ultimately, again, it says what? It says that in the first mana, wife number 1 takes 50, right? So I'll say, which sounds like they're, again, splitting the first mana, but if you're splitting the first mana, doesn't that require a chalukah of 33.3 zuz per woman? Where do you get 50? To which the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Bekoseves ba'alos masayim leba'alas moneh, din udvarim ainli imech b'moneh. Interesting. So Shmuel is saying, what's the case? The case is where the wife, with the ksuva of 200 zuz, writes to the wife of the ksuva of 100 zuz, I have no claim on the first moneh of the estate. Interesting. Well, if she has no claim on the first moneh of the estate, that means that there are only two women claiming the first moneh of the estate. We'll call it wife 1 and wife 3. And that's why we'll split it literally 50-50. 50 zuz, 50 zuz. Okay. Ihaki ema seifa. I'll say, but again, then look at the last case of the Mishnah. Shamasayim v'shal shlosh meos shalosh shal zahav. So we'll say, so then again, in the last case of the Mishnah, ultimately, again, we're talking about where each of the wives gets 150 zuz. Teimala hasalakta nafshach mina. Why doesn't it claim back again to wife number 2? You removed yourself from this zuz. Mishum da'amrle medinu dvarim hu desaliki nafshay. Ultimately, again, the only thing I removed myself was from the first manah, but I did not remove myself from any of the other manos. Okay? Hayusham shalosh meos. So remember again, last case of the Mishnah. If there was 300 zuz left in the estate. So remember again, how do we deal with that one? So we'll say, so ultimately, wife number 1 gets 50, right? Wife number 2 and wife number 3 get 150 each. So it says the Gemara. So, Hayusham shalosh good. Shamasayim maneh. I don't understand the wife number 2, she gets 100. Why did she get 100? Shivim v'chamishu d'isla. She should really get 75 if we're dividing everything. Amar Shmuel, because seves ba'alos shlosh me'os leba'alos masayim or leba'alos moneh din udvarim ili imachem emana. So we'll say once again, Shmuel says, what's the case? The case is where the wife with the 300 zuz ksuva, the wife with the 300 zuz ksuva, writes to the wife of the 200 zuz ksuva and the 100 zuz ksuva, I have no claim on the first moneh with you. So wife of 300 zuz ksuva is removing herself from the first moneh. And I will say, why she's doing that is irrelevant, but she's doing that. So therefore, Rav Yaakov minar pekod mishdei Ravina Amar reisha b'shtei tfisos uveseifa b'shtei tfisos. So once that comes along, Rav Yaakov of Nar Pekod said the name of Ravina. The truth is, both the reisha and the seifa are talking about, literally, tfisa means to take money, to seize money. What it means is that the funds are becoming available for collection in 2 different intervals. So here we go. Reisha b'shtei tfisos. What does it mean, reisha b'shtei tfisos? The naflu shivin v'chamisha b'chadzimna. So also it's very interesting. 75 zuz became available at once. Now both say, when 75 zuz becomes available at once, they split that equally. It's b'chadzimna. Umeya ve'esem v'chamisha b'chadzimna. And then another 125 zuz becomes available separately as well. Then I will say, ultimately, again, that will also, so 75 of that, they'll divide up equally, and the remainder of that amount will go to wives 2 and 3. Seifa b'shtei tfisos. Similarly, again, the Seifa, the second part of the Mishnah, is also talking about, again, where the money becomes available for collection at 2 different intervals. The naflu shivim v'chamisha b'chadzimna. So ultimately, 75 zuz becomes available at once, and therefore, when 75 zuz becomes available at once, it's divided equally between all 3 women. And then what? Umasayim ve'esem v'chamisha b'chadzimna. And then ultimately, again, 225 zuz becomes available at once as well. So the Gemara says, Tanya, zu mishnas Rabbi Nassan. All of this is Rabbi Nassan's opinion. I'll say, here we go, and this is perhaps the most important line of the sugya. Rabbi Omer, ein ani roed dvar Rabbi Nassan be'elu ela cholkos b'shaveh. Rebbe says, no. You're wrong. The halacha over here is that women in general split equally. Now I will say, let's talk about this for just a moment, because this is a fascinating halacha. Let me tell you it outside for just a moment. The way that the Rambam paskins is as follows. Let's talk about an ideal case. What's an ideal case? Right? Where husband dies and there's enough money in the estate to satisfy all of the ksuvas. Now again, I will say, remember again, there's a number of criteria to remember in this case. This is a very specific case. All 3 ksuvas are dated, same date. We're going to talk about the last Mishnah on Amud Beis, which we'll get to today, Meretz Hashem. So again, we're going to talk about where he marries wives at different intervals. So one wife has an earlier ksuva, a later ksuva. So obviously, if the dates are incredible, right? If you have, different dated ksuvas, so the earlier the date, the precedence you have in collecting your ksuva. So again, we're setting up a case over here. There's no precedence. All three ksuvas dated the same date. Okay, that's great. That's issue number one. Issue number two: different amounts in the ksuva. Different amounts. Again, wife 1 100, wife 2 200, wife 3 300. In a perfect world, Reuven dies. In a perfect world, Reuven dies. There's enough money in the estate to satisfy all three ksuva debts. Beautiful. Done. Distribute. We're done. What's unique about this case? Not enough money in the estate. Not enough money in the estate. So Rabbi says, so now what's interesting is as follows. So the Mishnah seems to set up a situation when there's not enough money in the estate, so we're going to go ahead and start dividing things up in different ways. So Rabbi say, just show you the way the Mishnah is structured logically. The way we look at money is we look at it in units of 100, because that's the way the Mishnah is set up. So you've got a first case is an estate that has 100 zuz, second case is an estate that has 200 zuz, third case is an estate that has 300 zuz. And I will say, when we look at that, we look at each zuz and see what level of claim do each of the women have on the zuz. So for example, on the first 100 zuz, who has a claim on the first 100 zuz? Who has that claim? All of them. Right? Because remember, again, everyone has a minimum ksuva of at least 100 zuz. When you work your way up, who has a claim on the second 100 zuz? Wives 2 and 3. Right? Who has a claim on 300 zuz? Right? You're the only wife 3. So when you look at it that way, I will say that's how the Mishnah is approaching it. So we work through this whole sugya. And that's why the Mishnah has to kind of come up, because the numbers don't really work if that's how you look at it. That's why the Mishnah comes up with these ideas. No, we're talking about a case where wife number 2 said to wife number 3, wife number 2 said to wife number 1, I have no claim on the first 100. So she's removing. So comes along Rebbe and says, stop. That's not how distribution works. If there's enough money in the estate to pay out all the ksuvas, fantastic. The moment there's not enough money in the estate to pay for the ksuvas, the default is split equally. And I will say that's how you pass halacha l'maisa. So therefore, again, in a case like this, where you have 3 wives, right? One is owed 100, one is owed 200, one is owed 300. So halacha l'maisa, Reuven dies. There's 300 zuz left in the estate, 100 zuz per wife. That's what we're going to do. We're not going to start getting into figuring out 100 zuz, because we'll say essentially we can't look at an estate like that. We just look at the estate as a whole. No, there's not enough money to satisfy the debt. Split everything equally. That's the halacha l'maisa. Next. So I will say, so now let's see the impact of this on business. Because on business, this is a really riveting case. Take a look. Remember again, what the Mishnah said, let me see, I don't think I printed this. Okay, I'll look it up. Good. What the Mishnah said, I will say, was as follows. So the Mishnah says, so too, you have 3 people, 3, right, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, who put money into a pot for business. So the lashon of the Mishnah was what? If they made money, lost money, this is how they divide up profit and losses. And we assume, this is how, in accordance with their investment, that's how they're splitting up profits and losses. So I'll say, here we go. Amar Shmuel, listen to this case. So Reuven and Shimon invested in a business. Reuven put in 100 zuz. Shimon put in 200 zuz. Amud Beis. Haschar la'emtza. So I'll say, incredible. What's haschar la'emtza? They split profit and loss equally. Now we're going to see what's the logic behind. So again, even though their investment amounts are different, they're going to split profits and losses equally. So let's analyze. Omar Rabbi says, Mistavra milsei de Shmuel b'shor lecharisha va'omid lecharisha. So we'll say, this is incredible. When does this make sense? This makes sense if Reuven and Shimon are partnering to purchase an ox for plowing together. So I will say, listen to this. If you're purchasing an ox for plowing, then everyone's investment is just as important. In other words, I will say, imagine this just a moment, right? So the ox is 300 zuz. So Reuven invests 200, Shimon invests 100. Is Shimon's investment any less important than Reuven's? Is it any less important? No. Why? because he can't get the ox without Shimon's investment. The fact that Shimon invested less does not make his investment any less critical to have an ox for plowing purposes. So this is fascinating. So because his investment is no less critical, he's looked at in halacha as a 50-50 partner. I just want to put a caveat over here. This is assuming, of course, that there was no partnership agreement to the contrary, right? If Reuben and Shimon go into business together, and ultimately they have an equity partnership, so therefore, again, in the partnership agreement, it says, our profits and losses will be split along equity lines. Okay, as they say, ein al ma lidaber. There's nothing to talk about anymore because we've gone ahead and we papered that. This is talking about in the absence of an agreement. In the absence of an agreement. But it's such a fascinating idea. Essentially, what halacha says is, do we look at your investment as crucial? How do you define crucial? We'll say, how do you define crucial? If I didn't make it, ultimately, again, would the results still be intact? So in this case, Reuben invests 200, Shimon invests 100 for the purchase of an ox for plowing. If Shimon did not make his investment, would ultimately the ox be plowing? The answer is no. So because of that, his investment is crucial, indispensable, and therefore the halacha looks at him as a 50-50 partner. When your investment is an indispensable part of the result of the partnership, halacha looks at you as a 50-50 partner in the endeavor. Incredible. However, says Rava, aval b'shar lecharisha v'omi letvicha. But Rabbi say, if halacha, let's listen to this. If let's say they bought a shar, but now ultimately again they're going to go. We'll say, take a look at Rashi. B'shar lecharisha shelakhu b'hen shar lachrosh. They bought together, right? They bought an ox to plow. V'charshin ve'ein chelko shel zeh moil below chelko shel zeh klum. I will say, here's the chap. Reuven's portion doesn't mean anything without Shimon's investment. Therefore, hilchach cholkin b'shaveh. So we'll say, so Rava comes along. However, now back to the Gemara. Aval v'shalach harisha v'amin letvicha zeh no talafima osav v'zeh no talafima osav. Rava said, watch this. If they go ahead and they bought a shar to plow, but then they decide, you know what? Let's barbecue. And so what do? They chef the shar. Then Rabbi say, everyone what? Everyone takes in accordance with their investment. Now that makes sense. Why? Because here you're literally physically dividing up the animal. So when you're physically dividing up the animal, there is a way to allocate 200 zuz to Ruvain and 100 zuz to Shimon. So I'll say, you hear the distinction? When the partnership is in a dynamic activity. Dynamic activity could only occur because of the investment of both of them. One invested more, one invested less. That is true. But Lamaisa, one's investment would be meaningless without the other. Then Halacha Lamaisa, they share in profits and losses equally. However, again, when we're actually talking about physically dividing something up, then halacha l'maisa, you can divide up in accordance with financial investment. So if they're now shechting the ox, Reuven will get 200 zuz worth of meat, Shimon will get 100 zuz worth of meat. Look at Rashi. Zenot l'fima also say first white line on top of Tzadikim lo Veiz in Rashi. Shai mischalik leivarav. You're literally dividing up the ox. V'hadinaket reishis mekhan lacharisha rabusa shmoyin and the afagav de meikara daita de miflik b'shaveh. Nachus l'shutfos hashtad the shevavas. So I'll say, by the way, why do you have to say? Why did the Gemara say this as a case of they originally bought the animal to plow, and now they're going to go ahead and shecht it? Just say they bought it to shecht, you divide it up according with investment, because it's a chiddush. Rashi says, even if they entered into the partnership for the purpose of purchasing an ox for plowing purposes, right? In which case they were going to be 50-50 partners, and now they decided, let's shecht it and divide up the meat. Even though now things have transitioned, ultimately, again, they split in accordance with their investment. So I will say, this is wild. This is absolutely wild. So here we go. So let's just review this idea. So Shmuel comes along and says, Reuven and Shimon are investing money in a partnership, right? Reuven 200, Shimon 100 to purchase an ox for plowing purposes. The ox now generates income. How do they show? What's the profit sharing agreement? 50-50. Why? So Rab explains why. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, even though they invested different amounts, Ruvain's higher investment would be meaningless without Shimon's lower investment. Shimon's lower investment would be meaningless without Ruvain's higher investment. Therefore, again, because they are both indispensable partners in the dynamic activity of the ox, they share in profits and losses 50-50. But says Rabbah, if they're actually going to shecht the animal and literally divide up the animal, pieces of the animal, then in that case, halacha l'maisa, they will divide up in accordance with their investment. Incredible. Rav Hamnuna argues. Rav Hamnuna Amar, no, afilu shar lecharisha va'omer letzvicha haschar le'emtza. So it says pretty wild. Rav Hamnuna says it's not true. Even if they're going to shecht the animal, ultimately, again, they go ahead and they divide up the animal equally. Pretty incredible. So we'll say, so this is the machlokes. So here we go. So meisvei, let's analyze. So shnayim she'etilu lekis zeh mana v'zeh masayim haschar le'emtza. So we'll say now the Gemara quotes our Mishnah. And what did our Mishnah say? Two people invest money into a business, Reuven and Shimon, right? And ultimately, Reuven invested 100, Shimon invested 200. Okay, I was reversing it. What's the halacha? Haschar le'emtza. So we'll say, what does it mean haschar le'emtza? So literally, again, profits are split down the middle. My love, b'shar lecharish va'omer letzvicha v'tiyufta d'rabba. They will say, are we not talking about a case where they originally purchased an ox for what purpose? To go ahead and plow, and then they decided to shecht it. So now we'll say, now they're literally dividing up the animal, and yet still, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says ultimately again haschar le'emtza. I'm sorry, the Brisa says haschar le'emtza, which means that they're dividing it up equally, even if what? Even if they're shechting it, that refutes Rabbah's position, seems to side with Rav Hamnuna's position. No. We're talking about a case where they bought an ox for plowing purposes, and the ox is going to be used for plowing purposes. That's the case where they will split all profits and losses right down the middle. Aval, Rabbi say if they bought an ox for plowing and then decided to shecht it, what's the halacha? Zeno telefima osav, v'zeno telefima osav. Everyone takes literally in accordance with the amount of money that he's invested. Okay, says the Gemara, if that's the case, adetoni seifa. Rabbi say, let's look at the end of that brisa. And what does the end of the brisa say? Lokach zeh b'shalo v'zeh b'shalo. Rabbi says another interesting case, another interesting partnership case. Let's say Reuven went ahead. Look at Rashi. Lokach zeh b'shalo shvarim beriim b'masayim v'zeh b'shalo shvarim kechushim b'mana. We'll say, watch this case. Reuven went ahead and bought with his own money healthy oxen for 200 zuz. Shimon bought with his own money weaker oxen, thinner oxen for 100 zuz. Okay, v'nis arvu. Rabbi says, great. What does this arvu mean? Right? Nisarvu means they made a partnership. Right? You think it means like they got mixed up. No, they made a partnership. So they decided to make a partnership of all of their oxen. Oh, Snebo says, what's the halacha? Zeno telefima osav. V'zeno telefima osav. Ultimately, Snebo say in that case, Ruvain. So then the partnership agreement is everyone shares in profits and losses in accordance with their investment. If that's the case, Rabbi say, liflog v'lisnei b'didei. Why do you don't even bring in this case, but rather again splice the Reisha case? How so? When is this so that ultimately halacha l'maisa everyone splits equally? So the Gemara says, when is that so? B'shar lecharisha v'omer lecharisha. Aval b'shar lecharisha v'omer letvicha. In other words, we'll say, if you're telling me that the Brisa agrees with Rabbah, namely that halacha l'maisa, when the ox is being used for some type of dynamic activity, that is when Reuven and Shimon are going to split profits and losses equally, even though their investments are different. But if the ox is going to be shechted, then halacha l'maisa again, everyone gets in accordance with their investment, the amount being in accordance with their investment. So then, don't bring up this case of the seifa. So we'll say the seifa's case is illustrating that. Here in this case, Reuven bought healthy oxen with his money, Shimon bought weaker oxen with his money, v'nis arvu, they made a partnership. Then the Brisa says, in that case, profit and losses are shared in accordance with investment. Why do you have to introduce a new case? If you want to illustrate a case of profit loss sharing in accordance with investment, just say like this: Ava b'shar lecharisha v'omer letvicha Zen no telefima osab, v'zen no telefima osab. Just say that halacha l'maisa, when they're actually shechting the animal, then in that case, halacha l'maisa, everyone takes in accordance with their investment. To which the Gemara says, Hachinami kamar. That's what it means to say. When is it so that Reuven and Shimon split equally, even though their investment amounts differ? B'shor l'charisha v'omi l'charisha. Rabbi say it's a case ultimately again of what? Of an ox that was purchased for plowing and is being used for plowing. So we'll say, so again, this is we're going now with Shmuel and Rabba's understanding that halacha l'maisa, when Reuven and Shimon are investing differing amounts, but what they're using the shor is for some type of dynamic activity, which obviously could not have happened without the investment of either of them, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, they split the profits and losses equally. Because halacha says, since the result cannot have happened without either of their investment, they're looked at as 50-50 partners. However, nase kimisha lakach zeh b'shalo v'zeh b'shalo v'nisarvu. I'm sorry. Aval b'shalo. Sorry. So b'shalo chavisha v'chavisha. Aval. So that's when they split equally, when they're purchasing an ox and using an ox ultimately for plowing. However, aval b'shalo chavisha v'omer l'tvicha. But listen to this. If they went ahead, Reuven and Shimon, so we'll say same case. Reuven invested 100, Shimon invested 200. Now originally they bought an ox for plowing purposes. However, v'omer l'tvicha, but now they're going to shecht it. So what's the halacha we'll say in that case? Na'aseh kimisha lakach zeh b'shalo, v'zeh b'shalo, v'nisarvu. That is, so the shechita case is similar to a case of Reuven bought his own herd, Shimon bought his own herd. They went ahead and they combined their resources into a partnership. In that case, profit and losses are split in accordance with investment. So the shechita case is like that case, and in the shechita case also, if they're literally slaughtering and dividing up the animal, they will go ahead and split it according to investment. The Gemara says, "Zeno telefima osav, v'zeno telefima osav." Everyone takes in accordance with his investment. Incredible. So right now, where the Gemara is holding is Rav and Shmuel are understanding this. So let's just clarify. Rav and Shmuel are understanding that halacha l'maisa, Reuven and Shimon go into business with each other, partnership, they invest differing amounts. So how do we split profits and losses? So the Gemara essentially says it depends. Rav and Shmuel, Rabba and Shmuel, what does it depend on? If they're investing in something which produces a dynamic result. A good example of that would be plowing ox, where again, the result could not have happened without the investment of both parties. Therefore, in the absence of a stipulated agreement, they share in profits and losses equally. However, halacha l'maisa, we'll see what the halacha l'maisa is. However, when ultimately, again, they have invested in an animal and we are quite literally physically dividing up that animal. Like now, we invested in a shar, we're going to shecht that shar. How do you go ahead and divide up the meat? In accordance with actual investment. That's what the Gemara is holding right now. Now again, that's in contrast to Rav Hamnuna, where Rav Hamnuna says, no, in every partnership, the default is 50-50, unless otherwise stipulated, even if you have differing investment amounts. Okay, so let's finish this up. So the Gemara says, Tanan, v'chein shlosha shetilu l'kis, pichesu oho siru. So we'll say again, remember, what was our Mishnah? Let's go back to our Mishnah. What did I say in our Mishnah? 3 guys, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, all invest in a partnership, pichesu oho siru. And I both said, we are assuming that the case of partnership in the Mishnah is parallel to the case of the ksuva in the Mishnah. Right? In the case of ksuva in the Mishnah, what did you have? You had 3 women, 3 different ksuvas. So therefore, what are we automatically assuming? What are we assuming? They're talking about a case of 3 guys, 3 partners, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, all of them investing differing amounts. And now what happens? So pichso, siru, their business, right, either appreciates or depreciates. Kach hein cholkin. Ultimately, again, this is how they divide up the estate. So the Gemara says, "My love, pichsu mamish, hosiru mamish." So I will say, it does not mean that literally the estate made money, the estate lost money. And I will say, it sounds like from the Mishnah that how do they divide profits and losses according to their investment? Because we also remember again, the Mishnah's view on ksuva was how do you pay out ksuva in accordance with the value of the ksuva. So the Mishnah sounds like it's paskening, like, right, that the Mishnah is paskening that when they invested differing amounts into the estate, that's how they share in profits and losses. We'll say this is incredible. No. Lo. Hosiru zuzi chadati hichsu astira ditunisa. And we'll say this outside, then we'll see this. This is absolutely riveting. So the Gemara says like this. No. What does it mean when it says it appreciates? The money of the partnership is still there. What it means is they were able to exchange the money for the partnership into better, higher level currency. That's what it means, hosiru. In other words, they didn't make more money. It's just the same money that has transformed into a higher level of currency. Or I will say, for that matter, halacha l'maisa, when it says they lost money, it doesn't mean they lost money. Just the currency which they have was devalued and is usable for nothing other. So astiro dutunis Rabosai means it used to. Well, let's take a look at Rashi. Zuzi chadati. Rashi says shematilin zuzim yishanim v'nasnu ba'an ad shenasu chadashim. So Rabosai, they took the original partnership capital, and was able to transform that very capital into newer currency. V'yotzin heim botza hilcha cholkin lefi hamos d'cholchad ma'diyav shakil. So listen to this. This is incredible. What's the case here? Reuven and Shimon and Levi all invested money. Reuven 100, Shimon 200, Levi 300. Okay. So we'll say now they have zuzim. Let's say through a series of transactions, they were able to upgrade the nature of the currency. Now we'll say, in that case, everyone shares in that currency in accordance with the proportion of their investment. What's the logic of that? What's the logic? Because it's the same investment capital. In other words, we'll say, let me give you an example. Imagine the following scene, right? Reuven and Shimon and Levi. It's very exciting. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi come, right? They decide, they're sitting in the sukkah, let's do business. You're allowed to transact business in the sukkah also. Should do everything in the sukkah. So we'll say, so what happens? Not only that, right? So Reuven goes ahead. So they all sit down at the table on Chalamayit, right? Reuven puts 100 zuz down. Shimon puts 200 zuz down. Levi puts 300 zuz down. They make a l'chaim mazel tov to the new partnership. Reuven says, you know what? I had a change of heart. We're going to go ahead now and dissolve the partnership. But we did that. Feel me? The halacha is we have to dissolve the partnership equally, right? Probably incredible, right? But it's a fantastic investment mechanism, right? Right? You came in with 100. Now, mamish, after a l'chaim, this does happen sometimes after a l'chaim, right? So after a l'chaim, you lose money, you make money. So no, obviously that doesn't make any sense, right? Why not? Because halacha l'maisa, we're going to go ahead now and what Rabosai? We're going to go ahead and divide up. In other words, when the partnership capital is there, so ultimately everything is divided in accordance with the actual capital. Everything is divided in accordance with the actual capital. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa. So right, in other words, if the capital itself is extant, everyone goes ahead and divides up equally. So therefore, Rabbi the Gemara suggests as follows, that in this case over here, where they took the partnership capital and simply did what? Upgraded the actual capital, nothing's been transacted with the estate, with the partnership. So therefore, everyone shares in their amounts equally. So because everyone shares in their amounts, good. Similarly, we'll say if the currency that they were using was devalued, everyone goes ahead and shares in that capital equally. So we'll say, so that's why the Mishnah is not a raya. The Mishnah is not a case where the actual partnership capital is still there. Nothing's been done. So if nothing's been done, everyone shares in accordance with their actual partnership investment. So we'll say, that's how the sugya ends. By the way, the example of the capital being devalued, I will say, if you look at Rashi says, Istari ditsunisa, shenifsala hamatbea ve'ein yotzeit spotza. So we'll say, this is talking about a case where halacha l'maisa, that the currency used was devalued, and I will say sometimes currency, when it's devalued, all it becomes usable for is to put on the wound of a foot. So apparently, again, I guess some of the properties of the coin have certain healing, curative abilities. So the currency was devalued. All it's used for is for a wound. So good. So we'll say, so I'll share with you something amazing. Sorry, I meant to print it out, but I didn't. Let me just pull it up here quickly. If I have it quickly, because it actually is a fascinating Shulchan Aruch. Shabbos says, now listen to this. So the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, this is in Choshen Mishpat. You can see in Choshen Mishpat, Simen Kuf Ayin Vav, Sif Hey. Shabbos, here we go. Because no, this is an incredible halacha. Hashutfin Shetilu Lekis. Shabbos, here we go. So partners go ahead and invest. They invest in a property, or they invest in a partnership together. Zemane v'zemasayim v'zeshin. Shabbos says, so again, Reuven's investing 100, Shimon's investing 200, Levi's investing 300. Or Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Good. Right? So what happens, Shabbos say? V'nisasku kulam mamon stam. Shabbos say, again, the Shulchan Aruch points out, no partnership agreement. No partnership agreement. Because obviously if there's a partnership agreement, there's nothing to talk about. Upichsu ohosiru. And now they go ahead and either, right, it appreciated, depreciated. Finish to the West Halacha. So the Gemara says, so hapechet, aschar o hapeches beinehem b'shave lefi minyanam velo lefi mos. They both say, we paskin halacha l'maisa, we're going to see like Rav Hamnuna, that in the absence of a stipulated partnership agreement, ultimately, everything, all profits and losses are split equally among all of the partners. We do not look at the investment capital. Rather, halacha l'maisa, it is split in accordance with just 50-50. 50-50. So the Gemara says, listen to this, get ready. Va'afilu lakcha shar l'tvicha. Let's say this is true, we pass like Rav Hamnuna. So whether they're purchasing a shar for plowing purposes, or they're purchasing a shar ultimately again for slaughter purposes, in the absence of a partnership agreement, the halacha is that what? We split everything equally. We split everything equally. So good. However, fine. So again, there is more to this halacha. But bottom line, Abosai, which is really quite a fascinating halacha, we paskin that in the absence of a stipulated partnership agreement, all partners will share 50-50 or whatever, equally in losses and profits of the partnership. Obviously, if there is halacha l'maisa partnership agreement, everything is dictated by the details of that agreement. Beautiful. Let's see the Mishnah. Misha so a man is married to four women. Apparently there was Tchias HaMesim since the last Mishnah. Right, so what happens? He's married to four women. Now in this case over here, as Rashi points out, the ksuvas have different dates. So umeis, and then he dies. Harishona kodemes l'shniya. Ultimately, again, the first wife takes precedence to the second wife. Ushniya l'shlishis. Second wife takes precedence over the third. Ushlishis l'revius. Third wife before the fourth. So again, this is all where their ksuvas have different dates. First wife has earlier date, second wife has later date, so on and so forth. Rishona nishpas l'shniya. So we're going to see that for the first wife to collect, she has to take an oath that she has not previously collected her ksuba. So wife 1 takes that oath to wife 2. Shniya l'shlishis. Wife 2 takes that oath to wife 3. Shlishis l'ravius. Wife 3 takes that oath to wife 4. What about wife 4? V'aravius nifra shelo b'shavua. Wife number 4 collects her ksuva even without a shavua. Benanas says v'chim mipnei shiachrona niskeres. Because wife number 4 was the last one, ultimately she gets to collect without a shvua. Afhilo sifra ela b'shvua. She'll say, understand the shvua over here is a shvua that the wife has to swear she has not previously collected her ksuva money from any other source. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Hayu yotzos kulam yom echad. What happens if all the ksuvas were dated exactly the same day? Kala kodemes lechaber ta'afilu sha'achas zachsa. I will say, then we look at what hour they got married. Let's say again, so we look at the hour. So in other words, if all the ksuvas were dated on the same date, we look at maybe who's earlier in the day. And Rabbi said, listen to this. The kachayu kosim Yushalayim shows. Rabbi said, in Yerushalayim, they wouldn't just put the date of the ksuva, but rather what? They would put the time of the ksuva as well. Hayu kulan yotzos b'sha achos. So Rabbi said, what happens if all the ksuvas have the same date, have the same time? Ein sham elamana cholkos b'shava. Then Rabbi say ultimately that reverts back to the last Mishnah. Then again, if there's only a limited amount of money in the estate, then halacha l'maisa they'll all go ahead and divide equally. Rabbi say shkoyach. You'll put someone else on.
For sure. We are privileged to continue today in Mesillas Yesharim, and today we will conclude in Mesillas Yesharim, the third parak. So the Ramchal continues, and he says, Kina davar hazeh. So remember again, in the last year, he gave the mashal that life is often like these life-size mazes, that a person begins on a particular path, and until a person is able to get to the platform in the middle, where one is raised above the maze, only then is one able to see the derech, the path that will allow one to ultimately reach their intended goal. So the Ramchal writes as follows: Kein hadavar hazeh. The same is true with life. Misha adayin lamashal biyitzrahu b'soch hashvilin lo yuchal lahavchin b'neiim. If someone is not yet asserted dominion or reined in his yetzer, his desires, he's essentially living a life where he's stuck in the paths. Lo yuchal lahavchin b'neiim, and unable to tell the difference between the paths. But those who are able to rein in their yetzer, not to conquer it per se, but at least to rein it in so that I control it, it does not control me. So often, if I'm not in control of my yetzer, I'm not in control of my desires, my wants, my proclivities, so often they will steer me down the wrong paths in life. But if at the end of the day I know someone, I have someone in my life who has made it to the middle of the maze and who stands perched above the maze and is able to see the maze in its entirety, that individual has the ability to direct me as to which direction in life I should go. So the Ramchal says something amazing. So imagine for a moment you were able to meet someone who made it to the end of the maze, or I should say the middle of the maze. He made it to the platform in the middle, so he's raised above all of the different paths in the maze. He knows exactly which are the right paths, which are the dead ends. What would he say to you? What would he say to you? So Ramchal says something amazing. What would he say to us? Bo'u chashbon. Bo'u nechashev shechashbono shel olam. Ki kvar nisu v'ra'o v'yadu shezel levadu ha'derech ha'amiti lahagia ha'adam el ha'tova asher mevakesh v'lo zulazeh. Ramchal says, you know what they would tell you? Bo'u chashbon. Live life with a chashbon. It's a play on the pasuk, but live life with a chashbon. Meaning what? Be the kind of person who lives life with zihirus, who lives life with awareness, who lives life with a sense of cognition, a sense of introspection. Don't be the kind of person who acts first and thinks later. But again, going back full circle, be the kind of person who identifies what is the tov ha'amiti, what is the ultimate good, what is the ra ha'amiti, what is the ultimate negative, what actions will lead me towards the tov ha'amiti and prevent me from being ensnared by the ra ha'amiti. Klalo shel davar. That's what the person in the middle of the maze would tell me. Think before you act. Have clarity. Have introspection. Clarity of mind. Decide where you want to get to, and then identify which actions will help you get there. Klalo shel davar. Ramchal says the general principle is tzarech ha'adam lios misponim b'sichlo tamid b'chol zman u'bizman kavua b'hisboddo. It's a very profound statement. Ramchal says the general rule in life is a person has to be aware, thinking, and thoughtful at all times, and he has to set aside a time to be alone with himself and to think, what is the true path? What is the path of Torah that a person has to walk on? So in other words, zihirus. Person, and the Ramchal over here, we'll discuss this more in the next chapter, but a person has to actively set aside time for this pursuit, because like anything else I don't set aside time for, it just doesn't happen. After a person identifies what is the best path for him to take, then I can ask myself, will these particular actions advance me on the path or derail me from the path? Because if a person identifies the path they want to take, and then identifies which actions will help me along this path and which ones will derail me, such a person has the ability to be successful. Such a person has the ability to become pure. Such a person has the ability to ultimately straighten out his or her life. K'mosha Kosov Omer, Palis Ma'agal Raglecha v'chol drachecha yikonu v'Omer Yinach B'sat drachinu v'nachkora v'nashuva al Hashem. So a really profound idea that the Ramchal is advancing. This concept that, first I think the metaphor of life being a maze is such an important one, because we all experience this at different times. We go down a path, and at first the path looks good. At first the path looks correct, and then over time I only begin to realize I'm hitting a dead end. I'm hitting a dead end. The Ramchal says it doesn't have to be that way. If I think ahead before I act and I identify the path I want to take, a good path, now I need to make sure I'm choosing the right path. And then before I act, I ask myself, will these actions lead me further on the path I want to go? Or will they chas v'shalom lead me on a different path which could be self-destructive? If I analyze each of my decisions through that prism, suddenly I'm making well-informed life decisions. And suddenly everything I'm doing is helping to contribute towards my greater life advancement. We'll stop over here. Mazel Tov on finishing the third chapter of Perkei Avos. Looking forward on Sunday, Me'eretz Hashem, to beginning Parak Dalid. Have a wonderful Shabbos.